Vice President JD Vance first rose to national prominence as the author of Hillbilly Elegy, a memoir exploring social and economic issues of working-class Americans in Appalachia. He's come a long way since those days, a very long way. And he's talking with Robert Costa.
On this porch.
Feels like you're out in the country.
All the way around the house. Yeah, it does. I mean, the president actually will bust my chops sometimes because he'll say, you have a nicer house than I do. A good friend of mine.
The vice president's residence can feel like a world away from the rest of Washington, D.C. And it is now home to a family with young children. The vice president and his wife, Second Lady Usha Vance, have three, ages 4, 6, and 9, with a fourth due in just a few weeks. The Vances invited us here to talk about the news of the day, as well as their family and the vice president's faith, the subject of his new book, Communion. It's the story of J.D. Vance's 2019 conversion to Catholicism, how that's affected his life, his politics, and their marriage.
You say she said to you, therapy didn't work for you, church does. True?
I do think that's true. And it's not that therapy doesn't work for other people, but JD just didn't have the right kind of trust in that process. He just didn't feel at home in it, really exploring some of the feelings that he had and trying to figure out how he wanted to be the person that he wanted to be for the rest of his life.
I'm trying to take the lessons, the moral truths that are rooted in Christianity, and I'm trying to apply them to a whole host of complicated real-world scenarios.
Maybe I'm misreading these passages of the book, but I really sense going through it, you have this desire not only for faith, but for the stability faith and organized religion bring to your life. You write at one point that sometimes in your own life you were, quote, permanently terrified that things will unravel.
Yeah.
You have this sense sometimes that things could spiral if you're not, as you would put it, rooted.
That's right. That's exactly right.
Is that true about how you think about the world, about who you are?
Yeah, I think that's very insightful. And, you know, I grew up in some ways a very non-traditional household. You know, a revolving door of people coming in, people coming out, raised by my grandparents at some points, raised by my parents at some points, my mom, my dad. So there was a certain movement and chaos to my youth. And I do think that I was searching for something that, again, felt a little bit more rooted and felt a little bit more stable.
For those familiar with Vance's 2016 bestseller Hillbilly Elegy, the story of his family's struggles, it's no surprise that Vance has sought order in his personal life.
We saw every single congressional Democrat sit on their hands. They didn't care about you. They didn't care about the people of this district. They didn't care about the farmers or the factory workers or the people who actually make this country run.
He has also sought combat in his political life, winning allies and critics.
You've called the Second Lady a good barometer for whether you've said anything that's a little bit too far out there. How does she let you know?
Well, she just texts me or calls me, or if we're sitting in the house together, she'll just tell me. You know, Usha's very blunt. It's one of the things I've always loved about Usha from the very beginning.
Usha Vance, an attorney who once clerked for Supreme Court Chief Justice John Roberts, is the daughter of immigrants from India. She was raised in the Hindu faith in Southern California.
Do you think there's anything misunderstood about how you both live your life as a couple, as a family?
Well, I mean, I think people really cottoned on to the idea at one point that JD was interested in my conversion. And I think that was misunderstood for the fundamental reason that he is Catholic. Part of his faith is wanting to spread his faith. But it's not like he's proselytizing to me every day.
In Vance's book, he describes how his values are shaped by his religion, his politics, and by people, including on the most personal of family matters. After last year's murder of conservative organizer Charlie Kirk, a conversation with Kirk's widow, Erica, helped lead the Vances to have a fourth child.
I think it really heightened JD's sense that he'd been talking about this for a while, this sense that there was this possibility of having another kid whom he could love as much as the three that we had. And it really did crystallize for you. That sense that if you could have that other child, then you would have nothing to regret. And if we couldn't have that other child, then we were very happy with the children that we had. So it was very powerful what she said about her own family, and certainly very moving to both of us. I think I had already started to open my mind to the possibility. I wouldn't say that this was, for me in any way, the decisive factor, but it came in the middle of a conversation that we were already having.
JD Vance is 41 years old, and his relative youth is especially notable today as President Trump celebrates his 80th birthday this morning. While there seems to be very little daylight between their politics, the war in Iran has revealed differences in how Trump and Vance assess the conflict at its start.
He was, I would say, philosophically a little bit different than me. I think he was maybe less enthusiastic about going, but he was quite enthusiastic.
Were you a skeptic, and are you still a skeptic?
Well, what I say, Bob, is two things. First of all, I think the president is exactly right that we cannot let one of the most dangerous and largest sponsors of terrorism in the world have a nuclear weapon. That is exactly right. And our policy is going to achieve that outcome. Of that, I feel extremely confident. Now, when you ask what was said in the privacy of deliberations,
well, I'm not asking that. It's more on a big picture level, Mr. Vice President. Did you see yourself as someone who was forged by experience in the Marine Corps, served in uniform? Were you more skeptic of a war in the Middle East, broadly speaking?
Well, I'd say, by the way, I think the president's like this too. I think both of us are generally skeptical of foreign military entanglements. And I certainly was formed by my time in the Marine Corps to be very skeptical of some of these entanglements. But fundamentally, that doesn't mean you can never use military force. And I think the goal here of preventing the Iranians from having a nuclear weapon, we're going to be successful at that goal. And when we are, that's going to be a very good outcome for the American people.
Vance has defended war with Iran against criticism from the head of the Catholic Church, Pope Leo XIV, who has stated, quote, "There is no just war there."
One of the things I sometimes will hear people say is that Christian pastors, Christian leaders, whether it's the Pope or anybody else, they ought to stick to politics, or they ought to stick to religion and let the politicians stick to politics.
Sometimes President Trump says that.
Well, he hasn't said it exactly like that, but I actually think it's important for Christian leaders to understand that, yes, there are classically Christian concepts like how does a husband treat a wife? What are the obligations that a father has to a son? Those are classic private matters that we think of as under the purview of Christian leaders. But I think it's totally reasonable and actually a good thing, even when I disagree. Like I've disagreed a lot with what the Pope has said about our immigration policy, for example. But I think it's a good thing for Christian leaders to say what they think about the moral issues of the day. Because I'm a big believer that the way that we ultimately find God, the way that we ultimately find truth, is to discuss some of these important issues with one another.
As a man of faith, as just a fellow human being, when you see not just Pope Leo speak out, but fellow Catholics, fellow Christians speak out with alarm about the Trump administration's migration policies.
Sure.
Its policies when it comes to Iran and military power and military action. How do you deal with that as someone sitting in the seat you're in as Vice President of the United States who also practices faith? You sense it as much as I do as a reporter. There is alarm out there as much as there is fervent support. There is alarm among Catholics and others about what's happening here.
Yeah, look, I think if you took 10 random Catholics all across the United States of America, you'd get 10 different perspectives on any particular policy. I think a lot of those Catholics, a lot of those Christians would support what we're doing. Some would not. And you ask, how do I deal with it?
Do you respect their point of view? Do you kind of listen to them?
Yeah, of course I do. And I think that you have to, right? Part of my job as a political leader is to try to understand where the American people are coming from. It doesn't mean that I always have to agree with this or that particular American, but you have to listen to people.
For JD Vance, navigating the political and the personal has been a constant of his rapid rise to the Senate and the vice presidency.
Do you and President Trump ever talk about the future?
I never bring it up, but sure, the president brings it up a lot, sometimes publicly, sometimes privately. Yeah, the president's a political animal. He loves this stuff. He's very fascinated by it.
Do you find him to be coy about where his mind's at, or encouraging of you possibly seeking the nomination down the road?
It's not coy or it's not positive or negative. It's just he kind of talks about it, like what's going to happen. How do we make sure that we're successful? What does that mean for the future? It's more of a conversation like that. I have no doubt that the President of the United States is going to be very supportive of anything that I ultimately decide to do, but we really just haven't talked about what that thing will be.